104.5, the team, your home for New York sports. We're joined by Chris Herring. Used to be the Knicks beat writer for the Wall Street Journal. Now he's the national NBA reporter for 538 and ESPN's True Hoop Network. Chris, let's start with your old beat. Let's go with these Knicks. They're driving me crazy. Why is every single game come down to the wire, and seems like almost every single one of those games they end up pooting at the end?
Well, I mean, we can start from the last question that you had. I think they generally have a pretty good rhythm going a lot of the time, and I think they basically grind the game to a halt. They decide to go one-on-one, even in kind of ill-advised situations, even when they don't need to. They played their best lineup that they have, the one with Porzingis at center and Carmelo Anthony at power forward. That's a lineup that any team would generally like to have, because it's one that spaces the court, gives you plenty of room to operate with. And even though they had that kind of setup against a pretty tough defense sometimes, they chose to kind of grind the ball into Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo would have double teams. You saw the one play that he threw the ball into the stands because he didn't see the double team coming, where he almost got the ball stolen from him because he almost turned the wrong way as the double team was coming. And there's just no need to slow the game down that much when you don't have to. Other teams move the ball at that stage in the game, and the Knicks kind of grind to a halt. So that's why their games are so close, is because no matter how many points they're up by, it seems like they always decide to kind of slow the game down. But why their games have played out the way they have in general, I mean, I just don't think they're good enough on defense, kind of what it comes down to. And so they play a lot of catch-up in so many of these games. It seems like they always make one of these comebacks that normally comes up a little bit short. But, the defense just isn't strong enough for the most part. It seems like they help way too much in the paint and then let guys get open three-point shots. And then the game always kind of grinds to a halt whenever they decide that they want to try to get an isolation basket from Carmelo at the end.
Is it defense, or is it the chemistry of the players that's the biggest reason as to why this team is currently below 500?
I'm going to say it's the defense, because I don't think on paper, I don't think a lot of their defenders are that bad. I think part of it is scheme. I think part of it is sometimes the lineups they run out there. A lot of the guys are kind of offense-minded guys, but I think certain guys like Justin Holiday, I think he's a pretty good defender. Some of it is health, too. Lance Thomas is one of their better defenders. He's obviously been out for a while. Porzingis is their best point. He doesn't really seem to look himself a lot of the time. Even if you look at the types of shots he's been taking lately, it doesn't seem like he really wants to get in the mix. And, he hasn't really been as aggressive offensively lately. And I think some of that might stem from the fact that he's not totally 100% healthy yet. But, Noah is a guy that even if he's giving you defense, and that's been kind of spotty here and there, and that's what he's known for, it's going to hurt you on the other end of the floor because guys don't have to really respect him and his offense. And so it's, the problem with the Knicks for years now, I think, has been that they've always been short on two-way players. You might have two or three guys that can kind of play both sides of the floor. I think Justin Holiday is kind of morphed into someone like that. Carmelo, when he's at power forward, sometimes can be that way. And Porzingis obviously has that ability. But then when you look at other guys, Noah is a guy that can give you defense when he's playing well on that end of the floor, but he's not going to give you much offense aside from maybe some passing that he's good with. Rose is a guy that can give you some offense and give you some sparks by getting to the basket, but he's obviously not going to defend anybody. And so that's been the problem for years, going back to, other players that they've had. Shumpert was often that way with defense and not much offense. And J.R. Smith could give you offense, but not much defense. And so that's kind of the problem. And the elite teams in this league, they have at least 3-4 guys out there at a time that can play both sides of the floor. And the Knicks, it kind of feels like if you sub one guy in, you know exactly what you're getting from him, but not anything else. And that's, at some point, they're going to need to shape the roster in a way where they can get guys or draft guys, which is probably the better way to do it, to try to get them to play both sides of the floor.
Chris Herring with us right now on 104.5 The Team. He's the NBA national reporter for 538 and ESPN's True Hoop Network. So, Chris, LeBron starts publicly complaining. A lot of people have been trying to connect the dots on where you could possibly trade Carmelo. This has become the hot topic. Do you think it's even remotely possible?
No. I mean, I just, I know Knicks fans are hungry, thirsty to see something happen with him to get that resolved. It's been a question for years. I just don't see how that is the answer. They don't have enough young players on that team. That's a team that's winning right now. Obviously, they're coming off a championship. and they just don't have enough youth on that roster to make it worth it. I think they've also dealt away several other picks going forward, draft picks that the Knicks would want to benefit from. I don't think you're going to get a king's ransom for Melo at this point. He's not necessarily a huge problem in terms of salary anymore, just because the cap has gone up by so much. So he could have made a lot more had he been a free agent last year, for instance, or this year. But I don't think he's stellar enough of a player. I mean, this is going to be the first time that looks like he maybe misses out on the All-Star game in 8 or 9 years or whatever that is. And so the fact that he's like a borderline All-Star at this point, the fact that he's going to turn 33 in May, the fact that he's not, someone who plays much defense, even when he was younger, I just don't think that a team is going to really sell out everything they have to get a player like that. And even if a team was, I don't think Cleveland would be the team to do it, because Cleveland doesn't have the resources to trade, assuming that they're not going to give up someone of real value, unless you're getting Kevin Love back. And even if you were, I don't think that really solves your problem. You need to go younger, and you need to get guys that are more in line with Kristaps Porzingis and his age right now. He's 21. And, Cleveland doesn't have young players on the roster like that, except for maybe Kyrie Irving, and that's not going to happen. So, the fact that there aren't the draft picks to get it done, the fact that I don't think they've got enough young players that are worthwhile, because Cleveland's not drafting high in the draft based on, what they're doing in the postseason.
So it seems unlikely it's going to be Carmelo going to Cleveland, but when you hear LeBron talk, it seems that he wants a playmaker, but is also a backup point guard. So Melo's off the table, but is that also the same for Derrick Rose in Cleveland?
I would think so, just because, I will say this. Derrick Rose in a backup role is way more appealing to me than the idea of, forcing him to kind of fit this narrative that, he's an MVP and so he should be a star. I mean, he has his nights where he's great, but he can't stay in front of anyone defensively. And so, at best, when he's scoring 25 points, it almost feels like a wash, because even if his man isn't scoring, his man is getting past him and then kicking the ball out to a three-point shooter that's scoring. And so it's still kind of stemming from Derrick Rose's poor defense, where the Knicks get just gouged every night. And so, honestly, yeah, that would be a great fit. That gives them a playmaker. You could make the assumption that Derrick Rose could just kick the ball out to LeBron and other guys on that team for days and get open threes because Rose is so quick and can get by people. But the idea of having a backup point guard on your roster is, a $21 million player, I think it might make more sense next year to do that. I'm not really sure what the Knicks would get or what they'd want for him, but maybe that would seem more realistic to me than the idea of Carmelo going, because Carmelo's got so many years left on his deal, and you look at the fact that, the Knicks are going to want something substantial back for him in terms of picks, in terms of young players, maybe Rose, but the fact that he's an expiring contract, I don't think teams will want to give up too much to get him either, because he's only got, at this point, a couple months left on his contract. So, I'm not sure. I could see Cleveland doing something, but I don't know that it would be to go get Derrick Rose and to put him in as a backup point guard. But maybe. I'm not sure what Cleveland has up its sleeve.
All right, Chris, before I let you go, I got to ask just quickly, do you think this Knicks team could rebound and possibly still be a playoff team?
They could. Do I think it's likely? Not necessarily. There's just a lot of things that seem kind of halfway there and not completely there. Porzingis' health is a big question. Carmelo has been dealing with shoulder stuff, and so they all play well at times. Derrick Rose has played pretty well as of late offensively, and so you kind of see the makings of it, but they do have some ground to make up. You figure they've still got a pretty decent part of their tough schedule coming up because they've still got to go west again. So I don't necessarily see it. If they do, it's probably going to be as an 8 seed. Maybe, if they get really hot, they get a 7 seed. But you don't want to see these guys just kind of keel over to make the playoffs. You don't want to see Porzingis fight through injuries the whole season to make the playoffs, because, that's kind of the problem with the makeup of this team in the first place, is that by putting out a team that's a win-now team, if you don't make the playoffs, everything feels like a failure. Whereas, last year, there were some elements of last year that felt like a failing, but at the same time, you got to see Porzingis progress. You got to see some of the younger players on the roster progress. And that's kind of the problem with the makeup of the team now, is that anything short of the playoffs is a failure, and you're going to see these guys do everything they can to make the playoffs, including, put themselves kind of in peril physically. And I don't necessarily know if that's the smartest thing to do. If you do want to try to trade Carmelo at some point, let's say you miss the playoffs again, you don't want the guy beaten up and having to have surgery when you want to put him on the trading block and you need his approval to do it. So there's a lot of issues with just fighting that hard just to get swept in the first round by Cleveland or whoever it is in the first round. So they can make it, but I don't necessarily know if it should be the sort of win at all costs sort of mentality that they're going to need to get there.
Chris Herring, we appreciate your time, even though it was a little bit of brutal truth. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me. Take care.